Welcome back to the best damn training channel on YouTube. I am warming up right now to build up to about 130 on the power cleans. I'm gonna do some threes today. I'll throw the VBT on the bar and see what kind of velocities we're getting at about 130 kilos today. I'm gonna be building up to 140 over the next couple weeks and try to get some velocity on that. Will Rattel was very interested to see how fast I can move 140 kilos, or I guess 143 because he said 315. So that's what I'm gonna do. So I'll be at about 130 this week, 135-ish next week, and then the heavy week for this block will go up to 143, and we'll do some reps on that, see if I can't get like 2 meters-ish plus on a power clean from the floor. But warming up, started with 70, did 105 right there. Throw the greens on right real quick. And this will be my last warm-up set here. We got 125 on the barbell here. Probably just do 1 to 2. I'm not gonna do a full set of 3 here. I just wanna move the bar, see how it feels, and then we'll go straight to our working sets. All right, so 125 felt really good. We're gonna throw some 5s on. I'm also gonna put the velocity tracker on the barbell, and then we'll start knocking off 3s at the 130 today. So with this specific device, it's important to try to get the bar as close to the center of the barbell as possible, especially when doing Olympic lifts. The reason you wanna do that is because the bar is gonna oscillate. There's gonna be a little bit of movement to the bar, that bar whip. And if you have the velocity tracker on the end of the barbell, a lot of times, if you have a good tracking device, it's pretty sensitive to those whips, and it could make these peak velocities spike up faster than what you're actually moving. So with the clean, because I'm gonna be having the bar contact my shoulders here, I've gotta put this thing just outside of my hand grip here in order to try to get it to as close to the center as possible to avoid some of that whip assistance, I guess is what you could call it. So I'll measure it out. We'll be about right here on the barbell. And then I've got my phone here, which I will set in front of me so I can see these reps in real time. And we're gonna start knocking off some sets of 3 here. All right, what do we got? 198 to 2.2. So not too bad overall. Say 2 plus means that we're moving the bar pretty damn quickly, especially on a power clean. So I would like these to be close to 2 or above 2 on each of that. So 198 is fine for the lowest repetition. 2.2 is a good velocity for the top end there. So 3 more sets on that. Another thing I like about the app is you can give it a range at which this velocity device has to move in order for that rep to count. So I've set it up to where anything under 26 inches will not count as a rep. And the reason why something like that is beneficial is because when I do my rep and I catch it and I drop the bar, there's that bounce. I don't want it counting that bounce as a rep and maybe skewing my numbers a little bit. So the bar is not gonna bounce more than 26 inches from when I drop it onto the ground, but it will travel more than 26 inches from the floor to the position at which I catch it. That way I can make sure that the velocities that I'm seeing on the device are the velocities during the rep and not coming from a bounce or a shorter range of motion movement. Maybe it's picking up, like if I move this bar around a little bit or do something like that, it's not gonna trigger that and make that part of the rep. So I really like that feature on it where I can make it say that the device has to move a minimum distance before it starts to actually count something as a repetition here. But let's see if we can't beat 2.2. All right, well, we had a misread here, which is part of the downside of having a device like this is when you don't have that cable connected. So you use like an OVR device or something like that, you're pretty much going to get a read every single time, no matter what, because it's going to be tracking that wire as it contracts back and forth in the little spindle and be able to give you a velocity on that. With this device being a Bluetooth device, sometimes when you're doing a repetition and the bar bounces around a lot and you don't let it settle, which you're like just knocking out reps one after another, you tend to see like one of those reps ends up spiking way higher than it should be. So it said I had a 5.21 on one of these reps, which is not true. I'm not moving the bar at 5 meters per second, but all the other reps were above 2. So 2.2 to 2.1 on each of those. So it's a better overall set than the first one. But we did have a little bit of a misread saying that it may the bar moved 5.21, which if I'm moving 5.21 meters per second on 130 kilos, that means my max is like probably about 400 kilos, which is not true. So that's the one downside of having a device like this. But we got 2 sets left. The bar's moving really well. I really like how everything's feeling. Also, given that this is the first clean session I've done in over a week since last week we were sick. So feeling good, feeling fresh. 2 more sets on this. We'll keep trying to keep this above 2, see if we can't beat 2.2 still. All right, we had 1.9 to 2.1. So we still got 1 more set. Try to beat that 2.2. $192. $190. We're getting slow, or slower. 190 still not slow. Oh, that one was terrible. That was a 1.8. Pretty decent overall. Yeah, 192 was the fastest one on that one. That last one, I just got it into my hip too much. I lost a lot of power there. Now, we're gonna move on to box squats. All right, so we're moving on to box squats, and just like I did with the bench press this week and choosing to use a variation on bench press that allows me to stick with the intensities that I intended at being. So rather than doing full range of motion bench press at 130 or 125, whatever it was I was on my bench press earlier this week, by doing that pin press, it allows me to still maintain that intensity, still lift the same loads that I want, but choose a variation that makes it a little bit easier for me. Because I've said this before, with the Summer Speed program, focusing a lot more on the sprinting side of stuff and the running side of things, I've lost some weight. And by losing some weight, I'm losing some maximal strength. Although relative strength is still probably there. Building this program out, I had the percentages in mind that I wanted to be at over the course of certain weeks. And as things started to get a little bit too heavy, what I started to do was choose variations that allow me to hit those percentages that I had in mind. So something like a full range of motion back squat, ass to grass, get down into the bottom position, stand yourself, back up. Obviously is always going to be a great movement, especially when we're looking at sprinting and jumping. Doing full range of motion squats is great, but sometimes we need to chase the intensity versus trying to stick with specific movements. So if I'm going to be at 75% today, which is going to put me around like 185 kilos, doing sets of 6 on that might be a little bit tough because, like I said, my recent 1 rep max on the back squat is probably a little bit inflated. So I still want to lift 185. How can I do that? Choose a variation that allows you to do that. So a box squat is a great variation that you could do in order to hit those percentages still and be able to move the weights with the intent that you want it to move. So I want this thing to be moving fairly quickly. Now, if I was at my strongest, doing 6 reps, 185 kilos, ass to grass squats, that bar would probably move fairly well. So what I'm choosing to do is get into a box squat position that's gonna put me fairly close to 90 degrees. And then I'm gonna be looking at just kind of exploding from this bottom position as quickly as I can. So we're moving the bar with intent at the intensities that we wanted to see, trying to maintain relative strength, so body weight in relation to what we think our maximum amount of weight that we can move is, without seeing too much of a decrease in strength overall. So we'll move pretty quickly through these warm-up sets. Also, another benefit of doing box squats is my hamstring still feels tight from yesterday. Box squats allows me to kind of let the hamstring rest a little bit because obviously getting down in this position here, like I can feel the tightness in the hamstring because you're flexed at the knee. Obviously the hamstring's got to be doing something, but being able to do a box squat kind of takes that hamstring pressure out of the movement a little bit, which allows me to also maintain intensity without having to further fatigue or risk injury. So box squat's a good variation for if you have a hamstring issue or some sort of ailment that's going to prevent you from getting down ass to grass. All right, well, that was 160. We'll just go straight to 185. We'll start knocking off these sets. I got 4 sets of 6 here. All right, 185 on the bar. And I know somebody's gonna ask, yes, I like to pick my feet up at the bottom of a box squat. Only reason I like to do that is because I feel like it allows me to really move that bar a lot faster than just kind of tapping and going. And what it also does is it reminds me that like when I get down to this bottom position, I kind of want the legs to relax for a second. We want to break up that eccentric to concentric portion. So picking the feet up is almost a reminder of now we are sitting on the box and we're trying to explode off of that rather than just kind of tapping and going. You're not really getting the benefits if you're doing a box squat. That box squat's there to break up the eccentric to concentric, but it's also there to really force you to push through that concentric. Like you've got to go from a dead stop to moving that bar with intent. So picking my feet up off the ground is not a bad thing when you're doing a box squat. Maybe powerlifters will disagree with me, but I don't really give a shit. Some of those reps definitely felt faster than others. Yeah. Started off with 132, and then there's a pretty even slope going all the way down. So it's like 132, 125, 107, 88, 86, 82. So everything above a 0.8. Fastest was a 132 on that first rep, but felt good. I like that. So 3 more sets here. 1 flat, 9.5, 107, 102.91. Not too bad actually. And those are peak velocities to remind you guys. These aren't like the average velocity over the course of the movement. I'm looking at what the peak velocity is on that. So still pretty good. We're close to 1, which is a decent amount of speed on that barbell. We'll knock off set number 3 here. I might do this repetition style. 1, to see if it'll pick up all the repetitions here, but then also to see if it makes that drop off a little bit slower because I'm knocking reps off a little bit quicker. Let's see if it makes me a little bit faster overall. Oh, I almost fell on that last one. I got a little out of control. All right, minus the last rep. Okay, the last rep was a 0.7 because I went halfway up. I felt like I was gonna fall backwards a little bit, but first rep went 0.96, and then it went 113, 113, 112, 119, and then I got sloppy with the 0.76 on the last rep. So by doing the repetition method, it's allowing me to maintain higher velocities over the course of each one of those repetitions, just because I'm not gonna be standing with the bar on my back as long, and I'm not pausing and resting at that position each time. Now it's saying, based off of the speed of all those repetitions there, my max would be like a 521. But obviously this is gonna be skewed because it's a box squat, not a full squat. And it doesn't know at what position of this box squat I'm going from. So close to 90 degrees is different than if I was doing a quarter squat. So I will say for this movement specifically, I could do 521 for 1 is what it's saying, not a full ass to grass box squat. Last set here, real quick though. I've got a lot of questions about this. The shirt, P.E.D, Performance Enhancing Drip. People want to know, where do I get this shirt at? I've seen you wear it. I've seen Tim wear it. Where can I buy this shirt? Well, I guess this is a sort of a announcement. Tim and I decided we're gonna start making shirts. And rather than doing specific merch for each one of our brands, Tim and I have very similar styles. We have very similar likes and dislikes. And this was the first time I went to Austin back in October of last year. So before the Coach 'em Up conference, Tim and I were talking about this. He had the idea of creating P.E.D. He didn't really have a name for it. He just wanted to call it P.E.D. And immediately it popped in my head. I was like, yo, we should call this Performance Enhancing Drip. He fell in love with it. I fell in love with it. A relationship was born. And out of that relationship, we have given birth to our first design here, which is to spread awareness, really, for the P.E.D. brand. Shirts will be available soon. Performance Enhancing Drip is a thing. We're gonna start off with this is our first design, just to get the shirt out there, get people wearing it, get some feedback on some stuff. And then we already have probably 2 to 3 extra designs planned that will be dropping probably every 3 to 4 months after we release this one. We wanna have each shirt kind of have its own time to marinate. We're also gonna have a limit per shirt. So for each shirt that we design and we release, there's going to be a maximum amount of those shirts that we're going to be able to sell, and then that design will be done. So once this shirt drops, we haven't decided specifically on what that number is yet, but there will be a limit to, let's say it's 100 shirts. 100 people can buy this shirt, and once 100 people have bought it, this shirt will no longer be available, and we rotate to the next design. We do the same thing. We're going to drop that shirt, 100 shirts available, and then we're going to keep rotating that. So each shirt is going to have sort of a limit on its availability, but the designs are going to get pumped out fairly quickly because we already have probably 2 to 3 other designs that we want to do. So at least for the first 4 to 5 shirts over the course of a year, we'll have a pretty good take on which designs do well, which ones aren't doing as well. Obviously keep Tim and I as the main designers and the main kind of contributors to the aesthetic that we're looking for with these shirts. But really all we want to do is we want to have fun. Put out shirts that people like wearing, obviously represents a brand, but it's also kind of a mindset of like, we just like to fuck around, have fun, lift weights, get better, and enjoy ourselves. So that's kind of what the Performance Enhancing Drip aspect is like. But let's go ahead and knock off set number 4. Last one here. I didn't really pick my feet up on those. Or at least I didn't feel like I did. But across the board, everything's higher than 1 meter per second. 101, 122, 11, 11, 102, 100. Not too shabby. So it's interesting to see these numbers. It's just really gaming each set to become competitive is how I like using velocity. I'm not using time to peak velocity. I don't give a shit about that. It's not that I don't give a shit about it. It's just, I don't think everything has to be relatable to something else. Sometimes training a specific movement is training that movement. Now, doing that movement will make you better at stuff, but it doesn't need to directly be linked to this other thing. And somebody had hit me up on Instagram since I've started doing this, and it's like, you need to look at time to peak velocity and then translate that over to your acceleration. And I'm just like, not everything needs to be the same time to peak velocity. If my time to peak velocity is 0.x seconds when I'm going from 0 to 10 meters on an acceleration, there's not really anything else I'm gonna do in the weight room that's probably going to mimic that more than just doing more accelerations. I don't need to try to take that time to peak velocity and bring it into the weight room and constantly hammer that number over and over and over again and move the loads around to make sure that I'm hitting that time to peak velocity, because there is a give and take where, let's say my time to peak velocity is a little bit lower and now I need to take a little bit of weight off in order to hit my time to peak velocity. Well, now I'm not lifting it as heavy. And I think a heavy stimulus is an important thing to maintain in your training program. So by using velocity to dictate the loads like that, I think is where velocity training is kind of overrated. Now that I said that, that reminds me of what Joe Padula just said on the Coach 'em Up podcast. I think he said this almost identically. So I'm sorry if I did watch that podcast, so maybe his vocabulary is taking over my brain right now. But I do think it's a little bit overrated, because when we're doing weight room movements, I think the important thing is to also maintain intensity in the weight room. Not everything needs to be fast. Not everything needs to be specific. Sometimes it's just like we need to be at 75%, and maybe we choose a variation like a box squat versus an ass to grass squat to make that velocity at 75% a little bit higher, but we don't change the 75% in order to maintain the velocity. That's how I think playing around with velocity training should be, is we need to still program based off of, you could do RPE and you can do percentage based or reps in reserve or whatever it is, but let the loading parameter dictate what's on the bar. And then if you want to use velocity to kind of dictate how that bar is moving, choose a variation that allows you to move that bar faster, or maybe makes you move that bar slower. So if we're doing box squats and we're trying to work on strength, and I see that this is still moving at 1 meter per second, maybe I need to lower the box a little bit, increase that time that the bar needs to move, maybe increase the difficulty of getting out of that bottom position to make that bar move a little bit slower, so we can be in a strength round, but don't change the load on the bar to match the velocity. So I'm gonna do some hamstring work now, and this is gonna be interesting because my right hamstring is still fairly tight. So I'm gonna choose a variation of a Nordic-ish or razor curl or something that's gonna allow me to hit the hamstring without hurting the hamstring a little bit. So I'm gonna take a few minutes here, strip the bar off, put everything away, and then we're gonna get after it. So I chose to do a Nordic-ish GHD raise, just focusing on the eccentric, because when I get down to that fully extended position, that's where I feel the most tightness in that hamstring. So pulling myself back up from there, I think is going to put the most amount of strain, but I can control myself into that extended position fairly well. So I've already done a set of this. I'm going to do about 4 to 5 reps on this, just trying to control that eccentric as much as I can, feel the hamstring work. And then when I get down to the bottom, that's where I feel the most amount of tension. And I'm just gonna raise myself back up to the top. Ooh. All right, we'll do one more. Oh, hammies. Feel pretty good. So I'm gonna do 3 sets total on that. Finally made it through week 5. Because I was sick last week, and last week was supposed to be week 5, and this week was supposed to be week 6. What I'm gonna do is week 5 now. Obviously, we'll go week 6, week 7. Week 8 was supposed to be a deload, but I'm gonna go from week 8, or I'm gonna go from week 7 straight into week 9. So I'm gonna skip that deload week and just transition straight into week 9. That way I can catch back up to everybody who's on the subscription side of things, and we can all be at the same week at the same time and be able to start progressing towards some sprint tests towards the end of this program. And then hopefully hamstring starts to feel a little bit better after a couple days off, because I'm not planning on doing anything this weekend. Take a couple days off, back onto the track on Monday, sled sprints, acceleration work, longer sprints to end that session. And we're gonna start upping the progressions on some of these plyometrics that we're gonna do. So there's gonna be a period of about 3 to 4 weeks where we're gonna go high volume, hard efforts on some depth jumps. And then we'll take those out of the program for about 10 days or so prior to doing any of our sprint testing, and try to use that depth jump progression and that depth jump measure to help with the acceleration side of things, to help with the overall production of power, rate of force development, all sorts of stuff that we can do. But I'm really excited. We're gonna probably start that in about 2 weeks. I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna go week 7. Actually, we'll probably start next week, because we'll probably go week 6, 7, 9, 10. So we'll do 4 weeks total of that. And then week 11, we'll take all of the depth jumps out of the program. Week 12, towards the middle, towards end of week 12 is when we're gonna do our test. So that'll give us about a 10-day to 2-week period after we do that. So Next week is probably when we're going to start doing a lot more depth jumps, a lot more plyometrics, and focusing on trying to get as powerful and springy as we can. So I'm really excited for that as well. But other than that, I appreciate y'all for watching. Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.